Patrick Swayze smoked 60 cigarettes a day. Not occasionally. Not during stressful periods. Every single day. And he did not stop, not even after doctors told him he had metastatic pancreatic cancer, not even when they explained that he had only a few months left to live. When urged to quit smoking, Patrick gave an answer that stunned those around him. "If I quit this," he said, "that will be what kills me, not the cancer." That sentence marked the beginning of the end. And it is also where this story begins. This is not a story built on rumor or speculation. It is based on medical records, on forensic analysis, and on Patrick Swayze's autopsy report. It is the story of a body that was failing in silence while the world believed everything was fine. A story of discipline, denial, and a man who continued performing long after his organs began to collapse. To the public, Patrick Swayze was strength made visible. He was the dancer who moved with effortless precision, the action star who performed his own stunts, the romantic lead who embodied confidence and control. From Dirty Dancing to Ghost, his image was defined by physical power and emotional intensity. He looked indestructible. Inside, he was anything but. Patrick Wayne Swayze was born on August 18, 1952, in Houston, Texas. His childhood was not gentle. His mother, a demanding dance instructor, enforced perfection through fear and punishment. His father, a quiet cowboy, tried to intervene, but often too late. From an early age, Patrick learned a lesson that would shape the rest of his life. Love had to be earned. Mistakes were unacceptable. Pain was something you endured in silence. That mindset became the foundation of his success. It also became the seed of his self-destruction. As an adult, Patrick pushed his body beyond reasonable limits. He refused stunt doubles. He ignored injuries. He treated pain as proof of commitment. When emotional loss struck, particularly after the death of his father, alcohol became an escape. When anxiety and pressure mounted, cigarettes became constant companions. Not a habit, but a dependency. By the time doctors finally spoke the word cancer in January of 2008, his body had already been fighting for years. The diagnosis was devastating. Exocrine pancreatic adenocarcinoma. One of the most aggressive and lethal cancers known to medicine. The tumor had already spread to his liver. There was no curative surgery. No realistic hope of remission. The prognosis was measured in months. Patrick cried. Then he went back to work. He continued acting. He continued smoking. He continued insisting that he was fine. To fans, he looked thinner, but still standing. Still smiling. Still moving forward. What they did not see was what was happening underneath. In this story, we will examine what Patrick's autopsy revealed. The damage to his organs. The weight his body lost. The scars left behind by decades of punishment, both self-inflicted and inherited from childhood. We will follow the final months of a man whose will refused to yield, even when his body no longer could. This is not a celebration of suffering. It is an examination of reality. Because when doctors finally opened the body of Patrick Swayze, they did not find a movie hero. They found the full map of human endurance written in damage, discipline, and denial. Long before Patrick Swayze became a symbol of strength on screen, he learned what pain meant inside his own home. Patrick Wayne Swayze was born on August 18, 1952, in Houston, Texas. To the outside world, his family appeared disciplined, ambitious, and driven by excellence. Inside the household, however, discipline often crossed into fear. His mother, Patsy Swayze, was a respected dance instructor, known for producing technically skilled performers. Her standards were uncompromising. Mistakes were not viewed as part of learning. They were treated as failures. From the age of 5, Patrick was required to dance. If he performed incorrectly, punishment followed. Medical and family records later confirmed that physical discipline was used. Patrick spoke of it openly as an adult. His wife, Lisa Niemi, would later confirm that he described those early years as violent, demanding, and emotionally cold. His siblings did not dispute his account. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. His father, Jesse Wayne Swayze, was a traditional Texan cowboy. Quiet. Reserved. A man who believed more in example than explanation. He was not absent, but he was emotionally distant. When he did intervene, it was often late. At one point, he reportedly warned his wife that if she continued striking their son, he would leave the household. The physical abuse stopped. The psychological imprint did not. Patrick internalized a lesson that would shape the rest of his life. Affection was conditional. Approval had to be earned through flawless performance. Pain was something to be absorbed quietly, without complaint. As a child, he did not rebel. He adapted. He became obedient, controlled, and hyper-focused on excellence. Dancing was no longer just an activity. It was survival. Each movement had to be precise. Each correction had to be anticipated before it was spoken. Over time, his body learned to respond automatically, while his emotions learned to stay hidden. Outside the dance studio, school presented a different challenge. Patrick was teased for dancing. Other boys saw it as weakness. The ridicule escalated into physical confrontation. In response, Patrick sought ways to protect himself. He played American football. He trained as a figure skater. He studied martial arts. Not out of vanity, but out of necessity. He needed to ensure that no one could overpower him again. One incident would later stand out as a turning point. After being beaten by several boys behind a church, Patrick returned home injured and humiliated. Instead of intervening directly, his father made a decision that would alter Patrick's understanding of control. He contacted the school and told them he would allow Patrick to confront each of his aggressors individually. Patrick did. He fought them one by one. He won. The message was clear. No one was coming to save him. If he wanted safety, he had to take it himself. That moment did not simply build confidence. It hardened something inside him. Vulnerability became unacceptable. Submission became unthinkable. By adolescence, Patrick had developed an identity rooted in discipline and endurance. He pushed himself relentlessly. Emotionally, he remained guarded. Praise mattered deeply, but he never believed it would last. Failure, in his mind, was not a temporary setback. It was a threat to belonging. In 1971, at the age of 19, Patrick met Lisa Niemi. She was 15 at the time and studied dance under his mother. Initially, she kept her distance. Patrick was intense, driven, and intimidating in his focus. Over time, they grew closer. Their bond was built on shared ambition and creative discipline. They married in 1975. Together, they moved to New York City. They had little money and no security, but they shared an obsession with success. Patrick worked relentlessly. He danced for theme parks, performed in musical theater, and accepted television roles whenever possible. Rejection was frequent. Financial pressure was constant. Failure was not an option he allowed himself to consider. This was not resilience born from optimism. It was resilience born from fear. Patrick did not believe he was allowed to rest. Stopping meant risking everything. Even early success did not ease that pressure. Each role was treated as something that could be taken away at any moment. Each performance had to justify his place. This internal drive would later be celebrated as professionalism, commitment, and work ethic. Few recognized it for what it truly was. A survival strategy forged in childhood, one that left no room for weakness. The habits formed during those years did not fade with fame. They intensified. Patrick learned to ignore pain. He learned to override exhaustion. He learned to distrust comfort. When injury occurred, he worked through it. When emotional loss struck, he did not seek help. He pushed forward. The same mindset that propelled him to the top would later prevent him from acknowledging danger. By the time Patrick Swayze became a global icon, the foundation of his endurance had already been laid. It was built on fear of failure, on conditional love, and on the belief that stopping meant disappearing. That belief would follow him for the rest of his life. And when his body finally began to fail, it would not be met with surrender. It would be met with the same response he had learned as a child. Endure. Perform. Do not stop. Patrick Swayze's rise to fame appeared sudden to the public, but it was built on years of physical strain and psychological pressure that had already begun to damage his body. By the early 1980s, Patrick had established himself as a working performer. He danced, acted in television roles, and accepted physically demanding jobs without hesitation. Success, when it came, did not bring relief. It brought expectation. Every role became a test. Every performance had to prove that he deserved to stay. In 1987, his life changed permanently. Dirty Dancing was produced as a low-budget film with modest expectations. Instead, it became a cultural phenomenon, earning more than $250 million worldwide. Patrick was not simply acting. He was dancing, singing, and performing with a level of intensity that made him instantly recognizable. He co-wrote and performed She's Like the Wind, a song inspired by his wife, Lisa. The film transformed him into an international star. With that success came relentless pressure. Patrick was now expected to maintain an image of strength, athleticism, and emotional control. He embraced that image fully. He performed his own stunts whenever possible. He refused to slow down production schedules even when injured. Pain was treated as an inconvenience rather than a warning. Then, in 1982, before his greatest success, but after years of strain, Patrick's father died. Those close to him later described this loss as a fracture he never truly addressed. His father had been a quiet, stabilizing presence, the one figure who represented protection rather than judgment. When he was gone, Patrick did not grieve openly. He worked. He drank. Alcohol entered his life gradually, then decisively. At first, drinking provided temporary relief. It softened anxiety. It dulled the constant internal pressure to perform perfectly. Over time, it became a dependency. Hotel rooms were destroyed during drinking episodes. On film sets, he sometimes arrived intoxicated. Colleagues noticed. Studios intervened. Patrick entered rehabilitation programs more than once. Each attempt brought temporary sobriety. None brought resolution. The pattern was consistent. Patrick would regain control, return to work, and push himself relentlessly. When something went wrong, an injury, a failed project, emotional strain, the alcohol returned. Lisa Nemi remained by his side, supportive but increasingly powerless. Love did not cure addiction. Discipline did not eliminate compulsion. Alongside alcohol, another dependency became permanent. Cigarettes. Patrick smoked heavily for decades. By many accounts, he consumed up to 60 cigarettes per day. He did not hide it. Smoking was part of his routine on set, during breaks, between scenes. Unlike alcohol, which he sometimes acknowledged as a problem, smoking was treated as non-negotiable. It was constant, automatic, and deeply integrated into his daily functioning. From a medical perspective, this combination was devastating. Chronic alcohol use placed stress on the liver, pancreas, and nervous system. Heavy smoking damaged lung tissue, restricted oxygen exchange, and introduced carcinogenic compounds into the bloodstream continuously. Together, they created conditions that undermined the body's ability to repair itself. Patrick's physical work compounded the damage. He rarely used stunt doubles. During action sequences, he absorbed repeated impacts. Over the years, he suffered fractures to both legs, injuries to his knees, damage to his back, ribs, and joints. Several surgeries followed. Pain became chronic. Instead of rest, he chose endurance. Instead of recovery, he chose repetition. Medically, this pattern is not unusual among high-performing individuals with rigid self-expectations. Pain becomes normalized. Symptoms are minimized. The body's warning signals are overridden in favor of productivity. By the early 2000s, Patrick's body was already under constant assault. He experienced digestive issues, fatigue, and unexplained weight fluctuations. These symptoms were intermittent and easy to dismiss, particularly in someone accustomed to discomfort. He continued working. He continued smoking. He continued performing. In 2006, the strain reached a breaking point in his personal life. Lisa Nemi temporarily separated from him, unable to continue watching him deteriorate. That separation forced Patrick to confront his drinking again. He sought help. He regained sobriety for a period. The cigarettes remained. They were not framed as a threat. They were framed as support. Nicotine for Patrick was not a pleasure. It was regulation. It steadied his nerves. It provided consistency in a life defined by physical and emotional extremes. From a clinical standpoint, this dependency masked deeper issues. Nicotine suppresses appetite, alters stress responses, and places continuous strain on the cardiovascular and respiratory systems. Over time, it contributes to systemic inflammation and increases cancer risk dramatically, particularly in the pancreas. By the time Patrick began experiencing persistent abdominal pain, weight loss, and digestive changes, his body had been compromised for years. Yet he did not speak about it. Friends later stated that he did not want to worry anyone, especially Lisa. He did not want to be seen as weak. He treated symptoms as obstacles to push through rather than signals to investigate. This approach had worked his entire life. There was no reason, in his mind, to believe it would fail him now. What Patrick did not know was that the process had already begun. Inside his body, cells were changing. Tumors were forming. Organs were losing function. The damage was no longer theoretical. It was active. And when the diagnosis finally arrived, it would not introduce a new battle. It would reveal that the battle had been underway for much longer than anyone realized. By the beginning of 2008, Patrick Swayze's body was no longer able to conceal what had been unfolding beneath the surface. For weeks, he experienced persistent abdominal discomfort. It was not sharp pain at first, but a constant burning sensation that came and went. He struggled with constipation, unexplained fatigue, and noticeable weight loss. These symptoms were subtle enough to ignore, especially for someone who had spent a lifetime overriding physical warning signs. Patrick did what he had always done. He minimized them. He continued working. He said nothing. On New Year's Eve, while attending a gathering in Aspen, Colorado, the discomfort intensified. After drinking a small amount of champagne, he felt a severe burning sensation in his abdomen. This was not something he could push through. Over the following days, additional symptoms appeared. His urine darkened. His stool became pale. His skin and the whites of his eyes began to turn yellow. Jaundice. On January 14, 2008, Patrick was admitted to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. Imaging studies, blood tests, and urine analysis were conducted. The results were immediate and devastating. Patrick Swayze was diagnosed with exocrine pancreatic adenocarcinoma. It is one of the most aggressive and lethal forms of cancer known to medicine. By the time symptoms appear, the disease is often advanced. In Patrick's case, the cancer had already metastasized to the liver. Multiple secondary tumors were present. Surgical intervention was not an option. Chemotherapy could only slow progression, not reverse it. Doctors gave him a prognosis measured in months. Patrick cried. Those close to him confirmed that moment broke through his emotional control. But the response that followed was consistent with the man he had always been. He did not retreat. He did not withdraw from public life. He chose to continue working. Against medical expectation, Patrick survived far beyond the initial prognosis. For 22 months, he continued to act, appearing in a television series while undergoing treatment. He arrived on set thinner, visibly weakened, but determined. He refused to let the illness define him publicly. He continued smoking. When asked why he would not stop, even after the diagnosis, he repeated the belief he had held for years. Quitting, in his mind, would destabilize him faster than the disease itself. From a medical standpoint, the toll on his body was severe. As the cancer progressed, Patrick developed cachexia, a condition marked by extreme weight loss, muscle wasting, and systemic breakdown. At his healthiest, he weighed approximately 82 kilograms. At the time of his death, his weight had dropped to approximately 54 kilograms. This was not simply weight loss. It was the body consuming itself to survive. The autopsy would later reveal the extent of the damage. Patrick's pancreas was no longer a functioning organ. It was described as being overtaken by multiple tumors, some necrotic, others calcified. The cancer had transformed the tissue into what forensic examiners referred to as a battlefield. The liver showed more than 20 visible metastatic lesions. The organ was hardened, discolored, and unable to perform its essential functions. His lungs told a different story, but one equally revealing. Decades of heavy smoking had left clear evidence. The lung tissue was darkened. Chemical residues from tobacco were present. Signs of chronic bronchitis and emphysema were documented. Oxygen exchange had been compromised long before the cancer reached its final stage. The heart, however, stood out. Forensic examiners noted that Patrick's heart showed no significant structural damage. Despite the systemic collapse around it, the heart remained relatively strong. It was a striking detail. His cardiovascular system had endured long after other organs failed. It reflected a lifetime of athletic conditioning and physical discipline. The autopsy also documented extensive prior injuries. Fractures in both legs that had healed imperfectly. Surgical scars from knee operations. Damage to the back, ribs, and joints consistent with repeated trauma. Patrick had insisted on performing his own stunts. Each injury told a story of endurance, but also of cumulative harm. His body bore the record of a man who never allowed himself to stop. In the final months, Patrick's condition deteriorated rapidly. He struggled to eat solid food. Pain became constant. Morphine was introduced, but his metabolism no longer responded predictably. His liver could not process toxins effectively. His pancreas could no longer regulate digestion. Oxygen delivery to the brain became compromised. His skin thinned. His frame became fragile. Still, he resisted complete sedation. He wanted to remain present. He wanted clarity. According to Lisa Nemi, even when speech became difficult, Patrick would move his fingers subtly, as if marking steps to music only he could hear. On September 14, 2009, at his ranch in California, Patrick Swayze died. He was 57 years old. The medical certificate listed the cause of death as multi-organ failure secondary to metastatic pancreatic cancer. Yet forensic examiners noted something rare. Even in the final moments, his heart continued to beat with strength. Neural signals persisted. His body resisted shutdown until the very end. Doctors described his endurance as extraordinary. Patrick Swayze's autopsy explained how he died. His life explains why he lasted as long as he did. The autopsy of Patrick Swayze explained how his body failed. But it did not explain why it endured for so long. Medically, the facts were clear. Metastatic pancreatic cancer had invaded his organs. Cachexia had stripped his body of strength. His liver was overwhelmed. His lungs were permanently damaged. His pancreas had ceased to function as an organ at all. Any one of these conditions alone could have ended a life. Together, they should have ended it quickly. They did not. Patrick Swayze lived 22 months after doctors told him he had only weeks or a few months remaining. That survival was not the result of medical miracles. It was not the result of denial curing disease. It was the result of a will shaped long before illness ever entered his life. From childhood, Patrick learned that stopping was dangerous. Rest meant vulnerability. Weakness meant abandonment. Those beliefs carried him through fame, injury, addiction, and, ultimately, terminal illness. The same discipline that made him a star also prevented him from listening to his body when it begged him to slow down. This story is not meant to glorify suffering. Patrick's refusal to quit smoking did not make him stronger. It accelerated damage that his body could no longer afford. His reluctance to acknowledge pain did not protect him. It delayed intervention. His endurance was real, but it came at an extraordinary cost. Understanding that distinction matters. Patrick Swayze was not defeated by a single habit or a single choice. He was shaped by a lifetime of pressure, trauma, and self-imposed expectation. The cancer exposed what had already been worn thin. His autopsy revealed the final damage, but his life explained the long erosion that preceded it. To the public, Patrick remained an icon until the end. Thin but standing. Ill but working. Determined, even when the body beneath the performance was collapsing. What fans saw was courage. What the medical record shows is something more complicated. A man who could not allow himself to stop even when stopping might have offered mercy. On September 14, 2009, Patrick Swayze died at the age of 57. The official cause was multi-organ failure due to metastatic pancreatic cancer. Yet those who examined his body noted something rare. His heart fought until the final moments. His nervous system continued sending signals. His body resisted shutdown long after hope was gone. That resistance was not accidental. It was learned. Patrick Swayze was more than a romantic lead or an action star. He was a man who gave everything he had, even when there was nothing left to give. He acted while dying. He endured while breaking. He carried pain quietly because he believed that was the price of being loved. His body was destroyed. His will was not. And that is why his story remains both a warning and a testament. A reminder that strength without rest can become self-destruction, and that even the strongest bodies eventually demand a reckoning. Patrick Swayze died. But he never surrendered.